Today we're going to discuss something that is in my opinion even more bullish than the Cardano BitcoinOS integration. I caught up with Phil from Anastasia Labs, who are developing Midgard, and was provided an insight on a monumental scale. When you put all the pieces together, it becomes clear that Cardano's L2 game is going to take crypto by storm, and again, it all points back to the unmatched design decisions taken by Cardano architects very early on in its development roadmap. Now the ecosystem is primed to truly reap the rewards of this. On the surface, what may seem insignificant to the average user is actually the most bullish series of developments that would feed into Cardano stealing the show at the height of the bull run and beyond. The devil is always in the detail. This is how Anastasia Labs, open source tooling and smart contracts, combined with the development of the Midgard L2, is priming the Cardano ecosystem for explosive levels of growth and adoption. This might be one of the most important crypto insight videos you will see this side of the bull run. Welcome back to Sapien, the channel for in-depth coverage and breakdowns of the most disruptive technology that's challenging the economic, political and social systems of the world. This video is brought to you in partnership with the Cardano Fans Stake Pool, so if you do find value in the content and want to help support this effort, please consider delegating to the Cardano Stake Pool ticker CRFA. Full details are linked in the video description. What I'm sharing with you today is, in my opinion, a seriously bullish sequence of events or developments on Cardano that for many has gone under the radar. Recently, Phil from Anastasia Labs has been sharing some incredible insights in Cardano spaces, and after having the opportunity to catch up with him directly, he opened my eyes up to something that has been brewing for a very long time in the Cardano ecosystem, but has significant consequences for not only Cardano, Bitcoin, but also the EVM world. If you thought the BitcoinOS integration was something like a silver bullet for Cardano, wait until you discover the true power of Midgard and what this L2 protocol is about to unlock. From a blockchain ecosystem perspective, for me, this is the hottest development in crypto right now. Today we will unpack this bullish insight to understand why your eyes should be firmly on Cardano, break down Midgard, a trustless scaling solution that's going to provide super high throughput for both Cardano and Bitcoin DeFi applications, and look at the bigger picture to why the work that's being carried out by Anastasia Labs and the development of Midgard itself is such a big deal for the growth and sustainability of the Cardano blockchain. So let's get into it. Before we dive into Midgard itself, let me share with you the first part of this incredible insight provided by CEO Phil from Anastasia Labs in our recent conversation. Since establishing themselves in the Cardano ecosystem, Anastasia Labs have embarked on a very deliberate mission to fuel the growth of Cardano through a combination of the advancement of open source tooling and Cardano DApp smart contracts and development of highly scalable L2 solutions. What may seem inconsequential to the average user has in fact been responsible for priming the Cardano ecosystem for the type of growth and level of activity we see in the EVM world. This might be one of the most ambitious and impactful strategies executed by a dev team outside of the Cardano roadmap itself. It's huge in fact, and we owe Anastasia Labs big time for having the foresight, determination, strategy and expertise to make this possible. If you've been a long-term viewer of the channel, you will know the contribution of Anastasia Labs as featured in multiple Sapien episodes, whether it be through the open source tooling, auditing of ecosystem dapps, or most recently the development of Midgard, a Cardano layer 2. The significance of their work and contribution in the Cardano ecosystem is clear. For anyone unfamiliar, Anastasia Labs are a Haskell-based Cardano development and auditing firm specializing in developing ZK applications and providing security analysis of on-chain protocols. They've been responsible for the auditing and open sourcing of a long list of Cardano dapps that you'll be very familiar with, like Lenfi, Genius Yield, Minswap, Wing Riders, and Fluid tokens, to name but a few. Throughout the build-out of the Cardano ecosystem, Phil and Anastasia Labs have been able to identify and resolve a large number of critical exploits of in-production open-source DApp protocols, not to mention a notable event in recent months where an attacker conducted a large-scale network attack on Cardano. Phil personally stopped this attack and looted the attacker's funds in the process to reinvest back into Cardano development. So it's pretty clear the value Phil and Anastasia Labs are bringing to the Cardano ecosystem. This is a world-class development team. So what is the significance of Anastasia Labs pushing for open source tooling and smart contracts? Very early on, as the Cardano ecosystem was just getting started, Anastasia Labs identified a problem and worked on a strategy to prime the ecosystem for Cardano to make sense economically. At the time, because the majority of dapps were closed source, and due to the lack of developer experience, the cost to develop a Cardano dapp to mainnet was extremely high in comparison to other blockchains. Fundamentally, when you promote open sourcing, it actually prevents the same application or dapp from being built over and over again. This feeds into improving capital efficiency, preventing builders from spending resources on development that already exists. When ecosystems remain closed source, it stifles the advancement, speed of innovation, and security of user applications. If new dapps are constantly having to start building from scratch, the chain falls behind, as rather than spending on innovation, they're spending on development that already exists. This is expensive and prevents new dev teams from entering the space. If, for example, a dApp has spent millions, if not tens of millions of dollars on research and development, when the code is open source, it enables new builders to arrive and build on top of what already came before. This means, for example, if $20 million has been spent on the development of a Cardano dApp, a new builder can enter the ecosystem and, using this open source framework, develop upon this, effectively inheriting the value of the research and development already spent on the open source tooling, smart contracts, and protocol to continue to innovate from there. This is what advances or matures a smart contract ecosystem and accelerates the dApp quality, which is why Ethereum is so far ahead in this respect. An example of this is the open sourcing of Uniswap and what this has done to propel the wider EVM-based applications. Thanks to the efforts of Anastasia Labs pushing for an open source ecosystem, now a new dev team can come into Cardano and, with all the open source tooling and dApps available, can literally build a new product for a fraction of the cost. Never before has the Cardano ecosystem been in this position from a development point of view. Now to launch a dApp on Cardano is far less expensive and, in fact, in many cases is cheaper than other chains. Because of the progress made in open source tooling, smart contract infrastructure, and programming languages, Cardano has never been better positioned to be the ecosystem of choice for new builders to come and launch new applications. This, combined with layer 2 solutions like Midgard, that we'll dive into in a moment, means Cardano can for the first time actually be in the conversation with the likes of Ethereum and Solana for both VC funding and attracting new dev teams to begin building on and exploring the Cardano ecosystem. Anastasia Labs spent all this time pushing for dApps to open source, conducting extensive audits and building the open source tooling necessary so the ecosystem could be primed in this way. For Anastasia Labs, this was all by design. They've been meticulously contributing to the open sourcing of the entire ecosystem with the bigger picture, long-term perspective in mind. Now, with a combination of Catalyst funding and the proceeds of the extensive development and auditing work they completed, they are now investing these funds into the development of Midgard, which is going to enable a powerful layer 2 scaling solution for Cardano. Could you have thought of a more impactful strategy? Prime the ecosystem with valuable open source dApps, tooling, and smart contracts, then develop one of the most innovative layer 2 scaling solutions to service the influx of activity this UTXO chain is about to witness. This is how you add significant value and prime the chain for meaningful adoption. Anastasia Labs have invested so much into the ecosystem from a dev tooling, open source infrastructure, and importantly a culture perspective. Many are missing how this is also important for where Cardano is today and where it's heading in the not so distant future. What these guys have been doing under the radar but effectively in plain sight is an incredible body of work and will largely be responsible for the real fuel that's about to supercharge the Cardano ecosystem. Outside of high throughput, it's the open source tooling and smart contracts that facilitates a more accessible developer experience that attracts more builders, users, and healthy VC involvement to the space. Today, Cardano is 10 times more capital efficient thanks to the largely open source ecosystem, meaning devs can spend efficiently on innovating rather than recreating what already exists. Phil shared more insights relating to VCs, Cardano network sustainability, and attracting new builders to the ecosystem that I will cover a little later in the video. But first, let's grasp a strong understanding of Midgard, as this is a big piece of the puzzle. Everyone is crying out for more activity on Cardano, yet currently, even if the entire 80 kilobytes of each Cardano block was full 24/7 for the entire year, this wouldn't generate enough revenue from transaction fees for SPOs to maintain operations. The current throughput is just not high enough for the required transaction volume to make the chain sustainable solely from transaction fees. Anastasia Labs, however, have a solution for this: enter Midgard. Midgard is a Cardano Layer 2 scaling solution known as an optimistic rollup that would deliver unbounded throughput for decentralized applications. This also benefits Bitcoin users with the recent BitcoinOS integration. A Bitcoin user can bridge to Cardano in a trustless manner, interact with high-frequency DeFi applications through the Midgard Layer 2, and then back to the Bitcoin network. Midgard will enable Cardano dapps to redeploy on the Midgard Layer 2 seamlessly with minimal changes to the underlying code or need to learn new tooling, and means they can tap into this highly scalable resource. This will greatly benefit Cardano and hybrid Cardano Bitcoin applications. Unlike sidechains that have their own independent economic security models, rollups inherit the security of the Layer 1. This also means that rollups have to pay for this security, so when we talk about rollups, they are batches of transactions. Midgard will be constantly transacting with the Layer 1, tons of transactions being processed on Midgard and then published to the Layer 1 in a single transaction. Check Optimism, a Layer 2 on Ethereum, is posting transactions all the time in every block. This will be the same with Midgard, so in effect Midgard is a protocol for creating transactions in transactions, adding immense value to Cardano by always relying on the Layer 1 for security and paying for this security through the high volume of transaction fees. It's been designed specifically to enhance the scalability of the Cardano Layer 1 by utilizing its powerful eutxo architecture. It does this by processing transactions off-chain to reduce the computational load on the main blockchain, rolling them up in batches before publishing them back to the Layer 1. By assuming transactions are valid by default and only verifying them if a fraud proof is submitted, optimistic rollups significantly increase throughput and efficiency. The immense throughput comes from the fact that you don't do any validation of the transactions when publishing to the Layer 1. This means transactions can be posted with high frequency and at a significantly lower cost. A Layer 2 like Midgard will be happy to pay more in transaction fees to the Layer 1 because of the amount of data or transactions it's handling. Midgard will be rolling up thousands of transactions at a time. This means the transaction fees accumulated is significant, therefore a Layer 2 will be happy to pay much higher transaction fees for the block space. While the traffic through user-based transactions cannot sustain SPOs currently, highly scalable protocol-based transactions that are paying much higher per block in transaction fees all of a sudden makes the Cardano blockchain sustainable based on this kind of revenue. This type of solution not only fast-tracks Cardano network sustainability, but also dApp scalability. Midgard utilizes Cardano's eutxo model to the fullest, and in the form of a Layer 2 scaling solution serves as another damning reminder to the EVM account-based global state model that Cardano chose UTXO for good reason. Many aspects of this scaling solution being UTXO based will demonstrate how inferior the majority of Layer 2s are in the EVM world. We will unpack this today. With Midgard and similar L2 scaling solutions, Cardano projects complaining about throughput, moving to Base and other ecosystems will be a thing of the past. In fact, it will completely eradicate it. Now, optimistic rollups have been possible on Cardano since Vassal, but until now haven't been developed. This delay allowed developers to mature the infrastructure that's going to make this solution so innovative compared to the rollups on Ethereum or EVM chains. A lot of the design patterns they rely on post-Vassal were in the inception phase and being battle tested, but now the Cardano dApp ecosystem has matured, and thanks to the open source decentralized applications and tooling available, the feasibility of these kinds of rollups becomes much higher. A Layer 2 rollup is essentially a dApp or smart contract protocol, so the robustness of a Layer 2 heavily depends on the maturity of smart contract tooling and smart contract design patterns in the ecosystem. All the tooling, open source contracts and advancements in languages like Aiken means the Layer 1 is now in a great position to deliver this innovative scaling solution. Based on its design architecture and UTXO, Midgard will be the first true Layer 2 rollup solution industry-wide that's both trustless and permissionless with no multisig. Optimistic rollups on Ethereum are extremely complicated, expensive and incredibly centralized. Cardano had the foresight to architect a blockchain that allows for these type of trustless Layer 2 solutions to be built out. The fraud-proof model on Midgard that we will unpack in a moment cannot exist in account-based systems. This, coupled with its killer feature that enables elastic dApp scaling, sets Midgard apart from all the Layer 2 solutions that came before. It really is a new generation of Layer 2 scaling solutions. The first version of Midgard is being designed to be Cardano's high throughput, high frequency blockchain scaling solution specifically for DeFi applications. However, Midgard is much more than a DeFi specific Layer 2. It's an entire open source framework for Layer 2s on Cardano. This framework is modular, allowing developers to pick and choose features to create the specific architecture to serve its own Layer 2 requirements. This framework means other Layer 2s can build on the Midgard stack to enable use cases that extend beyond only DeFi, for instance real world assets, gaming, ZK or supply chains. As the first and most robust modular framework, Midgard hopes to be the choice of Layer 2 solution for other projects and dev teams to come and build on top of and develop many Layer 2 solutions catering for a range of different use cases. All of these Layer 2 protocols will settle on the Cardano Layer 1 and pay for this security. Now let's go a little deeper into Midgard to understand more about its core features. For optimistic rollups to maintain security and integrity, they rely on a fraud-proof mechanism to ensure invalid or fraudulent transactions do not make it into the layer 1. One of the main criticisms of optimistic rollups is the participation level for submitting fraud proofs, as they are traditionally expensive and require high computational resources. On Cardano and with Midgard, however, any user can submit a fraud proof as it's so cheap and accessible. This encourages high participation. This is where Cardano's eutxo architecture and innovation of Midgard's fraud-proof system comes into play. Midgard implements an operator network. These operators manage the layer 2 state and submit state transitions or batches of transactions to Cardano's layer 1. Operators must deposit an ADA bond contract on the layer 1 to secure their role. The term optimistic rollup refers to the fact that from an optimistic point of view, the transactions being posted to the layer 1 with this layer 2 solution are valid and without error or fraud. This fraud system, for example, would give a 7 to 14 day challenge window after batches of transactions are published to the layer 1 for users to submit complaints called fraud proofs that demonstrate a user is aware of invalid or fraudulent transactions within the batch. In an optimistic case, nothing happens during this challenge period and the transactions are made final after the challenge period expires. However, in the event there is a bad actor or operator committing a double spend, for example, anyone can submit a fraud proof which is then executed on the layer 1 and the incoming transactions are then invalidated and not merged into the actual state. Optimistic rollups differ from ZK rollups because with ZK, when you commit a batch of transactions, you have to submit a proof that the results of those transactions are valid or the resulting state is correct. With this, you get instant finality. However, submitting this proof and verifying it on chain every time you submit a batch is expensive and can hamper throughput, especially when the proof is very computationally complex to construct. With optimistic rollups, you're presenting a batch of transactions and a signature from the operator posting them, who are importantly putting up collateral or a bond, effectively saying that we are confident the transactions are correct. However, in the event someone can identify an error, invalid transaction or fraud, part or all of the bond will be forfeited and credited to the fraud-proof issuer. This bond is significant and incentivizes both honest operators and, importantly, watchers, who will be very keen to diligently identify fraud. This economic factor creates an environment where operators are incentivized to remain honest and encourages scrutiny of the transactions coming from the layer 2 to maintain a healthy network. So in the case where all parties are acting honestly through the Midgard layer 2, then the optimistic rollup path means much less work is required to process the batches of transactions, because you don't have to generate these computationally intensive ZK proofs, hence the greater throughput and lower transaction costs. Even if you're not directly involved in Midgard, you are still incentivized to run a program to check for fraud, as these bonds will be significant, so the reward for identifying fraud is high. With such a system in place, it makes it almost impossible for any fraudulent transactions to make it into the network. Being a bad actor, the risk is high and the reward is low. The only way to be successfully fraudulent would be to submit a fraudulent transaction and hope that within the challenge period, not a single entity reviews your transaction. To run a fraud proof on Midgard, transactions will require extremely low-tech requirements. This makes it accessible to a wider pool of users who want to participate, or even Cardano SPOs could tag it onto their current operations with little additional cost. This rollup solution requires only one honest validator for the protocol to function securely. Anyone could submit a bond and become a validator on Midgard if you don't trust the Midgard validators themselves. Even if you don't intend on becoming a validator, anyone can submit a fraud proof. If you trust yourself and or the process you or some other entity is taking to validate the transactions, then this effectively keeps Midgard accountable and the security of Midgard is guaranteed. This is a very powerful property and extremely rare in blockchain, where just one honest party can assure the security of the protocol. In Ethereum's layer 2 rollups, to submit a fraud proof involves lots of computation because you have to access the global state, which is forever changing. This takes up a lot of time and is very expensive. Because of the global state, you don't have to execute just one transaction, but many transactions, because you can't pinpoint exactly where the fraud occurred. In Ethereum's account-based model, layer 2s have created complex systems for identifying fraud, and it involves lots of transaction fees. This is the problem with optimistic rollups that can be very expensive in a fraud challenge type scenario. On Cardano UTXO, state is localized, so to prove fraud, you can pinpoint the exact transaction or specific transactions, finding errors on a granular level. On Ethereum, this process can cost hundreds if not thousands of dollars. On Cardano, it can be as simple as one transaction and less than $1. The computational requirements and costs are low, supporting the trustless and permissionless accessible nature of Midgard's fraud-proof system. In Ethereum, just one fraud proof could cost thousands of dollars, and because very few have the tech requirements and resources to do this, the process remains heavily centralized. On Ethereum, all Layer 2 solutions rely on a centralized multi-sig approach. In Midgard, you will see security and trustlessness in a way that doesn't exist anywhere else. So while in Ethereum you can still say that anyone can prove fraud, because of the costs and tech requirements, decentralized participation is not incentivized because the risk is too high. On Ethereum, rollups have a major problem when approaching trustless, permissionless and decentralized layer 2s. Check L2B, you can see what state of decentralization these rollups are in. Lots have trouble making progress in terms of openness of who can submit fraud proofs. On Cardano, due to UTXO local state, Midgard's fraud-proof system doesn't have this problem. Fraud proofs can be submitted fast and cheap. Realizing trustlessness and decentralization is much easier, and truly inheriting the security of the layer 1 much more achievable. However, in terms of optimistic rollups, the trade-off here comes in the form of finality. Whilst optimistic rollups deliver immense throughput, they suffer from much longer finality times due to the requirement to have a fraud-proof challenge period. So although the throughput is great in trading finality, how exactly is this immense throughput useful to general users if they have to wait, say, 7 days or more to have their transactions settled on the layer 1 and access their funds? After using Midgard for high frequency DeFi plays, what use is this if you can't get access to your funds until after this fraud-proof challenge window? Well, this is solved by an extremely innovative and activity generating solution that will actually mean users won't be impacted by this challenge period at all, delivering instant withdrawals from the Midgard layer 2, so super high throughput and instant withdrawal. It achieves this through a network of third-party providers called liquidity providers. This will enable users to exit the Midgard layer 2 immediately. To become a service provider is permissionless, meaning anyone can establish this third-party service as a business operation or single entity. This enables any user to submit a withdrawal request from Midgard to one of these third-party services. The withdrawal request will be automatically routed to one of these service providers, who are then incentivized to check the batches of transactions, verifying there is no fraud. Once verified, the third-party provider will let the user withdraw by paying them minus some service fee, and they can do this with zero risk, as anyone can independently verify that there's been no fraud. So if you're running one of these third-party services, there is no risk, and you just have to wait for the challenge period to expire in order to receive the funds after paying the user. This way, the user benefits from immense throughput, immediate withdrawal, and access to funds, and the service provider makes a service fee and then recovers the remaining funds after the transactions are settled on the layer 1. These liquidity provider services could be individual users or entities building a business out of offering this roll-up settlement service. The baseline user will not even know that this is all taking place, only that they are selecting an immediate withdrawal from Midgard. A dApp would integrate to Midgard and tap into this network of liquidity providers, all completely automated. This achieves the immense throughput of optimistic rollups and speed of withdrawals to counteract the trade-off in finality. These third-party service providers also create an environment where there is a strong incentive for honest participation to exist. The third-party providers are making it their business to monitor the Midgard transaction batches anyway, as they want to be able to provide the fast liquidity withdrawal service to users. During this process, if they do detect fraud, then they would just submit a fraud proof and claim the bond or bounty. So in establishing a network of liquidity providers, not only delivers a seamless user experience, but contributes to the security of Midgard, as transaction batches will be being verified constantly. Effectively, this will be a collaborative effort between Midgard, the dApps, and third-party service providers to get all of this integrated for a seamless user experience. Through the utilization of Midgard software development kits, dApps will integrate with Midgard and the network of liquidity provider services. With the fraud-proof and withdrawal system, while all this activity is happening, the layer 2 is paying high volume of transaction fees to the layer 1. Unlike sidechains, because rollups inherit the security and economic consensus of the layer 1, Midgard will be paying for this security in huge volumes of transaction fees. This is why Ethereum aligned its roadmap to focus on these kind of layer 2 solutions, as the fees they generate for the layer 1 network is so high. This feeds into the long-term sustainability of the layer 1. All economic growth in the past 3 years in the EVM world has been as a result of these kind of layer 2 solutions. The foundation of Cardano is extremely well suited for optimistic rollup scaling solutions. The fact that Cardano focused on a robust decentralized consensus, the liveness of the network maintaining no outages, formal verification for the highest security guarantees, and extending the UTXO model are the type of properties you need for these kind of trustless rollup solutions to exist. For the settlement layer, it maximizes security, which is what you want from a blockchain. Then through innovative layer 2 solutions that benefit from its architecture, you achieve super high throughput. These are very deliberate architecture decisions. Cardano had the foresight very early on to establish exactly what Cardano's core strengths were going to be. The foresight to see that decentralization and security architecturally is not only for mission critical systems or applications for large scale businesses, but also the fact that they are powerful characteristics for super high throughput scaling solutions. To build a rollup, its main goal is to inherit the security of the layer 1, and assuming there is at least one honest actor, you inherit that security. So while the industry mocked Cardano and was hellbent on scaling and throughput fast, Cardano was more concerned on delivering the kind of foundation that would serve these scaling solutions with a long-term view in mind. While extensive research has been done on optimistic rollups on other chains, they've never really been implemented on UTXO chains. However, with Cardano's eutxo model, we have unique properties that these other optimistic rollups don't have, and as a result, we can do lots of things that they can't, making them far superior in comparison. Cardano has the benefit of being able to observe other ecosystems and how these rollups played out, so we know the pitfalls. This goes back to that third mover advantage that I've talked about on the channel before. EVM built lots of layer 2 solutions and had to retrospectively fix problems with them. This is a major pitfall. On Cardano, however, we're aware ahead of time of these issues, like UX issues and lack of communication mechanisms. Midgard is being designed specifically with these things in mind. Cardano devs have had the ability to see how the Ethereum layer 2 ecosystem played out, observing the problem areas and also the technical solutions that now exist, like interoperability solutions that allow layer 2s to communicate with each other. Anastasia Labs, however, identified that although tech solutions exist, a social issue emerged where each layer 2 has its own communication solution. Optimism has one, Polygon has one, all the major layer 2s have one, and they all want the other to use their own solution. The first layer 2 to get traction will dominate the market. On Cardano, the developers in the layer 2 space are very close. They know that this is a big issue, and if they don't work together early on, will experience similar pains as the EVM world. This is something the development of Midgard has focused on heavily. But now to Midgard's most killer feature in elastic dApp scaling. Interoperability with the layer 1 becomes much easier because all data in Cardano is localized to UTXOs. This detail enables elastic dApp scaling, something that can't be replicated on Ethereum. What this enables is the transitioning of the dApp state between the layer 1 and the rollup. On Ethereum, you couldn't move a Uniswap pool or the entire protocol to the layer 2 and back again. This would be a huge problem due to the total global data stored that makes up Uniswap or any other complex dApp protocol. On Cardano, state is localized, so all state has to exist in UTXOs. So a DEX or lending liquidity pool is just one UTXO, and moving that pool to a layer 2 and back to the layer 1 is just transitioning a max of 16 kilobytes of data between them. This means you can move partial application states between the layer 2 and layer 1. In the case of a DEX, for example, pools with higher activity could transition between the layer 2, and less activity pools can remain on the layer 1. This enables Cardano dapps the ability to add resources to the protocol depending on traffic loads to help cope under higher congestion. This is more cost effective, enabling the system to scale resources based on traffic. And believe me, this is no easy feat to achieve, not even in the Web 2 world. As Midgard is isomorphic to the Cardano layer 1, meaning that decentralized applications can seamlessly redeploy on Midgard using the exact same code and tech stack, this feature significantly reduces the burden on developers, allowing them to leverage the benefits of the layer 2 without modifying their existing codebase, tech stack or architecture. With elastic dApp scaling, Midgard will enable dApp developers to incorporate this into their applications. The dApp will then insert a feature, for example, where a user can provide consent for their transaction to be processed on the layer 2. The dApp can then offload or delegate the transaction to Midgard when the chain is congested. On Ethereum global state, you would need to deploy the entire app to the layer 2, which means redeploying the whole application and sending lots of data, which is extremely complicated. This is what makes Midgards so unique and will demonstrate that some of the early design decisions in Cardano have lots of substance to them. This will allow developers to do some really amazing things that are truly impactful from a UI, UX, user fee and feature perspective. Yet another example why the UTXO model is far superior. From a user perspective, you might not even know that you're interacting with Midgard at all. For example, a user could turn on an option within their Cardano wallet to enable Midgard only during periods of high transaction volume on chain or when the L1 is congested. Alternatively, you could actively bridge funds to Midgard through your wallet in the form of a normal transaction that you make on Cardano and conduct all DeFi operations through the layer 2 before withdrawing back to the layer 1. Using Midgard for DeFi allows users to interact natively from within their Cardano wallet, delivering a seamless user experience. With Midgard, EVM layer 2s are going to have serious competition, attracting VCs, builders and users. At the start of the video, we discussed the importance of Anastasia Labs implementing this strategy to push the ecosystem to open source their dapps, smart contracts and tooling, and why this has been such a significant endeavour. If you want to attract VCs, you need an environment that can easily attract and onboard new development teams with mature open source infrastructure and scalable layer 2 solutions to build and innovate the products that will create high volume user activity. The lack of layer 2 scaling solutions is the single most limiting factor for Cardano ecosystem adoption. Thanks to the work of Anastasia Labs and other brilliant ecosystem development teams pushing for open source development and the build out of layer 2 scaling solutions, Cardano is now primed for this type of explosive growth. Effectively, Midgard removes another monkey off Cardano's back. When we talk about Cardano and the product market fit, in Midgard, we will have a layer 2 solution far superior to the EVM world. The account-based model will not be able to compete from a security, technical capability, developer and user experience perspective. Its trustless, permissionless and decentralized properties will enable high participation and user adoption. Midgard being not only the DeFi layer 2 but the framework for comprehensive Cardano layer 2 solutions with different requirements and feature sets enabling scalable gaming, real-world assets, supply chain layer 2s and many more. With these type of rollup scaling solutions, Cardano will finally be able to attract the type of VCs that are healthy for the ecosystem, ones that aren't solely predatory in a dump token and leave sense, but in terms of investing in the L2 protocol and have an interest in the layer 2 ecosystem that's handling massive transaction volumes. Cardano historically had a real issue attracting VCs, but the emergence of Midgard is already demonstrating how this is beginning to turn. BitcoinOS recently announced the development of a Bitcoin layer 2 solution that will facilitate Bitcoin staking in the BOS ecosystem building on the Midgard framework. This has already attracted the investment of a Bitcoin VC. For DeFi, use Midgard or use the Midgard framework to develop a layer 2 specific for your dApp or business solution. The fact that BOS already identified Midgard as a solution before its MVP is a credit to the innovation being produced here, and also provides more confirmation that Anastasia Labs' strategy for expanding the Cardano ecosystem has great substance to it. For me, Midgard is probably the biggest development in the Cardano ecosystem right now. You have to align the product with the economic incentive of these VCs. The difference between token VCs and protocol-based VCs, when they invest in the protocol, the money stays in the ecosystem. When it's a token-based investment, they dump the token fast and then dump the ADA and leave. Midgard and scalable layer 2 solutions is a huge piece of the Cardano puzzle, and with the up-and-coming BitcoinOS integration in mind, a massively important factor if Cardano is going to service the level of activity and liquidity that's potentially on the horizon. We're on the cusp of an explosion of activity where Cardano Layer 2s are going to funnel sustainable revenue to the network and SPOs in transaction fees from a whole range of Layer 2s. This also means that big business use cases and decentralized applications will now be able to choose Cardano to deploy on a Cardano Layer 2 to serve their scaling needs. With Midgard, instead of dApps leaving the ecosystem, they can deploy on the Midgard Layer 2 or use the framework to create the Layer 2 with the right feature set to cater to their application. This way, they can retain the benefits of the Cardano Layer 1 security, remain in the ecosystem, and continue paying the main chain in network fees. Once dApps are deployed through Layer 2s, the dynamics completely change. You won't only compete with the EVM Layer 2 world, but surpass it while retaining the security guarantees of the Cardano Layer 1. This can bring a huge influx of liquidity and volume into the Cardano ecosystem, and in fact is the only route to it. It creates economic stability, a rich environment for developers, a playground for VCs, huge value to the Layer 1 and ADA itself. If anything, I can see an influx of developers wanting to now deploy on Cardano Layer 2s. The real beauty is at the heart of it, we have a world-class development team with the necessary experience in Anastasia Labs, who are not only delivering this innovative Layer 2 solution, but will be on hand to support the new builders such a technological feat is guaranteed to attract. This makes developing new Cardano Layer 2s and building within those ecosystems even more desirable. The fact is, Cardano scaling its primed eutxo ecosystem presents the most compelling proposition for VCs, developers and users alike for explosive activity. For now, keep it sapient, keep it blockchain, and keep it Cardano.